Olá, o programa Direitos Sem Fronteiras de hoje volta a falar de justiça climática e sustentabilidade. Justamente o nome do seminário organizado recentemente pelo Supremo Tribunal Federal a propósito da COP30 no Brasil. E para conversar sobre o tema, temos aqui no estúdio do Direitos Sem Fronteiras dois convidados. O professor doutor Michael Roach. Ele estudou Direito, Ciência Política, Economia e é fundador e diretor executivo do ICANN, o Instituto para a Proteção Climática, Energia e Mobilidade, uma instituição alemã de pesquisas reconhecida pela ONU. E o doutor Andrew Lawson, da Universidade New England, da Austrália. Muito obrigado a vocês dois pela participação aqui no programa Direitos Sem Fronteiras. A primeira pergunta que eu faço é ao professor Andrew. Eu gostaria que o senhor nos explicasse um pouquinho qual é o trabalho exatamente que o senhor faz, qual é o foco das suas pesquisas.
I work at a research group called the Agriculture and Law Research Hub at the University of New England in Australia. And in our research group, we look at issues of concern to rural communities and their environmental concerns and also some social concerns. So we have looked at issues of the impact of farming on the environment. We've looked at issues around conserving biodiversity on farms. We have worked with farmers on issues of water and water in the landscape and rehydration of the landscape. We work on some social issues as well, and perhaps the most important of that is around farm succession. So looking at the transfer of family farming businesses from one generation to another. And all of that links in one way or another to climate change, even the issues of farm succession, because where farms are stuck and they're not being transferred to a new generation, that means there potentially is less innovation and less opportunity for younger people to come in and bring ideas that could improve the farm. The other issues around climate change are important because climate change is really hitting hard in Australia and in rural communities, and rural people bear the brunt of climate change much more so than urban people in Australia. The big issues, the effects of climate change or the impacts of climate change in rural Australia are things like bushfires, floods, droughts, cyclones, things that are happening in Brazil as well.
Por falar nisso, o Brasil e a Austrália são países que têm uma geografia muito diferente, um clima diferente, mas há certamente semelhanças, inclusive porque ambos têm no campo uma boa parte, uma boa fatia do seu desenvolvimento econômico, seja na agricultura, seja na pecuária. Há mesmo semelhanças? O que se aplica, o que acontece lá, se aplica aqui de acordo com as suas pesquisas?
There are many differences and many similarities. The similarities, I guess, Australia and Brazil are big countries in area. Brazil is a big country in population. Australia has a small population. The landscapes are different. We have more desert and arid areas. We probably can never have the population that Brazil has. But we're both big countries reliant on industries that depend on natural resources like farming, like mining, like tourism, and that is important to our economies. We have similar types of farming in some cases. We are a big beef cattle producer, and so is Brazil. We have big areas of dry land farming and irrigated farming, and so does Brazil. So there are many similarities in the way that climate change affects Australian farmers and Brazilian farmers. There's probably many similarities in the way the world systems of law and governance and international law will impact our farmers and people in rural areas. There's probably many similarities as Brazil. Yes.
Professor Roach, o senhor é diretor executivo de um instituto importante, o ICANN, reconhecido pela ONU. Eu pediria que o senhor nos explicasse qual é exatamente o trabalho do ICANN.
Yeah, so I'm heading the institute. It's an affiliated institute actually to a University of Greifswald at the Baltic Sea. And when I have founded it 15 years ago, we have anniversary, we said we want to make work on climate governance. So in a nutshell, giving advice to governments and the European Union how to reach climate targets. And within that, we saw that we need a full energy transformation. This is the E in ICANN, so Institute for Climate Change, Energy, and we also need a full transformation of the transport sector. So meanwhile, we have 60 researchers. At the beginning, people thought that such an institute is not needed, but working on the law and policy framework of climate transition is extremely important. Governments normally agree on far-reaching targets, but then the work starts that actually this transformation will not change only our whole economy, our whole society, but also our whole legal order. So across the legal order, laws and statutes are relevant for the energy and climate transformation. This means I could name you thousands of topics, and in my institute there are hundreds of projects running.
Eu gostaria que o senhor nos falasse um pouco da experiência europeia, de uma forma geral, da União Europeia no combate à crise climática. Como é que o senhor avalia esse trabalho? Ele tem sido feito no sentido correto na sua avaliação?
So actually, yes, there was a huge effort. First of all, the European Union had to see which competences it has, but it found that in the area of environment and energy, Europe can proceed. And we had, under the head of Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the Commissioner for Climate, a huge program called the Green Deal, where they really tried to bring European solutions in all the areas affected by climate change and by climate protection. And I think this was very ambitious to make Europe carbon neutral. And after that, they implemented, so the European government, as to say, implemented a program Fit for 55. So the Commission made proposals for all different areas, also including agricultural law, traffic law, the whole energy system. A lot of that was transformed, but we are now at a critical stage in Europe because, and this is relevant also for other countries, majorities are changing. So we are afraid of losing dynamic. But so far, Europe can be called a good example of climate policies.
Professor Lawson, eu gostaria que o senhor nos falasse um pouco sobre os principais problemas, os principais desafios que as comunidades australianas enfrentam, seja no campo, seja nas cidades, enfim, onde é que está o principal problema na Austrália em relação ao clima, claro.
Australia is a very urban country. The rural population is much smaller. The power and money in Australia is in the cities, not in the rural areas. But the problems are in the rural areas. The difficulties of how to adapt and respond to climate change falls heaviest in those areas outside the big cities, outside of the metropolitan areas. So one of the big challenges is how to convince the urban part of our population that votes in elections, to convince them that there is a need in rural Australia for political support and material support, financial support. So that's an ongoing issue of how we address that. And as I've said before, the effects of climate change are falling heaviest in the rural areas. So the effects of drought, it impacts on the economics and the industries that support rural communities much more heavily than it does in the cities, where there's a much greater diversity of the economy and of industries. Similarly with floods and bushfires, those natural disasters, or perhaps man-made disasters, climate disasters, have a greater impact in rural areas than they do on the urban economy. So in that regard, rural people, people who rely on rural industries, people who live in rural communities and are dependent on services provided in those communities, feel the brunt of the increasing effects of climate change.
Professor Rode, eu peço que o senhor faça uma avaliação do papel do sistema jurídico, da Suprema Corte alemã, ao lidar com a questão climática. Na sua opinião, a justiça alemã e até a justiça europeia está preparada para esse desafio? Mas eu vou pedir que o senhor responda daqui a pouquinho, logo depois do intervalo. O Direito Sem Fronteiras, portanto, faz uma breve pausa e volta já já. O Direito Sem Fronteiras está de volta. Hoje falamos de justiça climática e sustentabilidade, justamente o nome do seminário organizado recentemente pelo Supremo Tribunal Federal a propósito da COP30 no Brasil. Para isso, temos aqui no estúdio dois convidados. O professor Michael Roach, ele estudou Direito, Ciência Política e Economia, é fundador e diretor executivo do ICAM, o Instituto para a Proteção Climática, Energia e Mobilidade, uma instituição alemã de pesquisas que é reconhecida pela ONU. E também o professor doutor Andrew Lawson, da Universidade New England, da Austrália. Professor, no bloco anterior eu deixei uma questão no ar, peço que o senhor nos fale sobre ela agora. Eu lhe perguntei sobre o grau de preparo da justiça alemã e da justiça europeia para enfrentar as dificuldades que a questão climática oferece. Por favor.
I think overall in the European Union there is a strong will to reach the targets of climate neutrality, what the European Union has set as a law, even as a binding law. But we face the problem in Europe that we are a federal system. So the competences are shared between the European Union and the member states. In Germany, we have an additional problem that we are in ourselves a federal state. So we have a overall federal construction, and this means much more work to reach the goals. But I think the European Union has gathered all its competences possible to steer the way, and Germany has anyway then all the competences to amend it. But in a federal state, this is similar to Brazil. It's of course very challenging when there are units in between, Länder in Germany, and then municipalities, where the energy and climate transition in the end takes place in the households, in the public transport, and so on. So we are prepared, and in the end, it's political will, which was up to now in the European Union very strong for the energy and climate transition. But in recent years, some countries voted more for the right side or populist side, and now it's endangered that we get sufficient majorities on the European Union. We are trying to keep what we have got, this program, which I explained, which leads to 2025. But it depends on the political will. The instruments, my institute and others have developed a variety of instruments to do it, but in the end you have to apply them and you need political will.
Eu faço uma pergunta semelhante ao professor Lawson. A Austrália, o sistema de justiça australiano, os tribunais australianos estão preparados para enfrentar a questão climática? Eu peço até que o senhor nos faça uma abordagem internacional, digamos. O direito internacional tem instrumentos suficientes para lidar com o assunto, ou essa é uma questão que merece uma discussão maior entre os países?
Australia has been struggling to articulate a position in response to climate change. It has been, in the English expression, is a hot potato, a political hot potato for over a decade, and has been the cause of the downfall of some governments. So we've really struggled to come to a national consensus, and we need that in order to create effective laws to deal with the expected impacts. So it feels like we're a little bit behind, or a long way behind. We should have started earlier, but we didn't, so we've got a lot of catching up to do. Certainly we have a lot of advantages that we can use to respond to the climate crisis. We're a relatively wealthy country, relatively peaceful, have a strong rule of law and strong system of governance. So we have some of the elements there that we could really do a good job if we set our minds to it. I guess, as other people have said, it takes political will, and that has been up and down, the political will.
Professor, o que a Europa e o Brasil precisam fazer para ter uma colaboração maior no campo do combate às mudanças climáticas? E qual o papel do hidrogênio verde na sua avaliação nesse processo?
So first of all, cooperation is extremely important in learning how to deal with the energy and climate crisis. We are so under pressure, and it's not easy to develop instruments to achieve our goals that we want. So we have to cooperate. Also, the scientific community has to cooperate to fine-tune and to develop instruments. And we can especially learn a lot from each other, as Brazil and the European Union and Germany are federal constructions, so this makes it even easier to learn from each other. Green hydrogen is, I think, a very interesting piece of cooperation. For the European Union, it's clear that we need a lot of green hydrogen to decarbonize, to go to the goal of climate neutrality. Because in our perspective, green hydrogen made from green electricity is the storage we need then to fuel aviation and lorries and so on. And the European Union is clear that they will import a lot, and there are countries like Brazil who prepare to export. And this doesn't work from alone. We need a legal framework, and then economic incentives to do that. And actually, we are just starting projects comparing the legal orders and what has to be done to make this effort and this aim of, on the one side, producing green hydrogen, on the other side, importing green hydrogen in a fair way.
Professor Lawson, acho que não há nenhuma dúvida que bons resultados nessa área só são possíveis se houver uma cooperação internacional completa de todos os países, pelo menos dos países que têm um grande peso, como os Estados Unidos, que recentemente deixaram o Acordo de Paris. O senhor é otimista ou pessimista sobre a aplicação do que foi decidido na COP30, sobre o futuro das mudanças climáticas?
There are many reasons to be pessimistic because the situation is urgent and we haven't done enough to get to where we want to be, and we will allow certain effects of climate change to manifest in our economies, in our societies, and we're on that course and we can't change it. On the other hand, there are many reasons to be positive because even as big countries like the United States may take a side role, there are many other countries that are clear on the issue, clear that things need to be done, and it must be done cooperatively, that we have to do it together. We're stronger together and we're in it together. So there are many reasons to be positive, and in my home country I'm inspired by young people who have the most to lose if we don't get it right, and they are positive about the potential solutions. So it's a bit of both, pessimism and unease about whether we've done enough, but we must be hopeful.
E o senhor, professor, nessa balança, o que pesa mais? O senhor é mais pessimista ou mais otimista?
I have to be optimistic. This is my philosophy, but when you see governments like the US stepping out of the process, then you think you could lose optimism. But with a nearer look, closer look to it, you see that the Paris Agreement has set up a really well-working scheme that the states have to give nationally determined contributions. So each state has to explain what it will do in climate and energy transition. And having a closer look, we see that it's inspiring. This process is inspiring. Before, everybody was hiding to get targets which are burdensome, and now we see a development that the states give in more and say we have these policies, and then other states watch. And especially when you look at China, India, really relevant countries, but also Brazil, and taking the United States, you must also see the states in the United States. I see a dynamic development, and so more optimistic than pessimistic. And in COP, it's more technical questions that have to be solved about this process. But the ambition should be a dynamic ambition, and I think we are in a good course in that.
Muito bem. Chegamos ao fim do programa de hoje. Eu agradeço muito a participação de vocês dois, professor Michael Rhodes e professor Andrew Lawson. Mais uma vez, obrigado. E obrigado, claro, também a você que nos acompanhou. Não deixe de seguir a nossa programação nas redes sociais e no aplicativo TV Justiça Mais. Até o próximo programa.